Hello, this is Mike at Game from Scratch, and welcome to This Week in Game Development. This is for the week ending December the 7th of 2016. And This Week in Game Dev is just a quick recap series that goes over the news and events that happened in the world of game development for the previous week. And unlike the last couple of versions, this is actually for a week's news. So basically, this goes from the news that happened at the end of November up till today, December the 7th. So without further ado, let's jump right in. Now, as always, there is a text-based version of this particular list of events that we're going to go through. All the links are available right here. I will link this down below. All right, so the first piece of news going back to the end of November is Cocos Creator 1.3.2 was released. Now, Cocos Creator is a JavaScript-powered all-in-one game engine and editor built on top of the Cocos 2D-X stack. It's very cool. I'm actually going to be looking at this in a little bit more depth somewhere in the future. I've had quite a few requests, so this is one of those things I'm going to jump into. Now, this release has quite a few little pieces, changes here and there, but most of it's about performance increases for both web and native platforms. So you can see changes across the entire area. Now, another thing to be aware of is they deprecated support for 32-bit versions of Windows. Now, for the most of you, unless you're running Windows 7 at this point in time, not too many people should be running a 32-bit version anymore, but the editor tools will no longer run in 32-bit. I do believe you can still compile for 32-bit platforms, but I don't want to be quoted on that. But the tools do not work on a 32-bit system anymore. So if you want 32-bit support, you're going to have to go over the previous version. Another update was, and this one's a biggie, I guess, Unity 5.5 was finally released. Unity 5.5 has been in beta for a long time, and it's cool that it's finally here. Of course, you know what Unity is at this point in time. It's pretty much the preeminent indie game engine. Sorry, Unreal, but I think Unity does have more users than you, so it probably earns that title. Didn't say it was the best, said it was the preeminent. Joe, splitting hairs there. But anyways, this release brings us a couple of cool things. HoloLens support for the people that are getting into augmented reality or AR development. Codeless in-app purchases. So basically, you can add in-app purchases to your game without using any code, which is cool. New particle system or improved particle system that has a new light module, so you can basically attach lights to your particles. A noise module, a trails module, and improved gradient color particle systems. Improved animation workflow, better line rendering component, new splash screen tool. That's kind of the biggie, the whole made with Unity thing. It's changed across all the various different tiers, and one of the big things they did is you can now customize the splash screen, so all games don't start looking really generic. So that tool is finally available to the general public. A new HDMR image-based lighting tool. It's, I think, for previewing what HDMR lighting is going to look like. Visual Studio Code support. Visual Studio Code is the stripped-down, code-focused editor from Microsoft. I'm a huge fan of it, by the way, so if you have not checked out Visual Studio Code yet, do so. It's completely free, it's completely open-sourced, and it's available on pretty much every platform. Sounds like a Microsoft product, doesn't it? So anyways, the other thing they launched was beta support for Unity Collaborate. Now, Unity Collaborate is basically their team services, source server type thing. It's for collaborating with a number of people across different platforms. The free version, you can have up to 5 people in 5 gigs or something to that effect. So it's neat that that's out now as well. Also, somewhat tertiary to this, they also released their Connect, which is for finding games or finding a job or employing people in the Unity system. That was launched as well. Another Unity release this week, a little bit less impressive, is patch for 5.4.3p2. I think we're going to stop seeing all of these concurrent patches to previous versions now that 5.5 is the official branch. And as we will see shortly, 5.5 is already starting to see its first bit of patches. Again, this is mostly just fixes because this is legacy releases. This is going to be pretty normal because the 5.5 branch is where the majority of development is going to be going from now on. And the older patches are pretty much just for maintenance reasons. Another release this week was, well, not really a release, sorry, but an announcement. This one's a little strange, actually. It's Crytek, for their CryEngine, announced that they've got, I'm going to call that schematic, it's schematics, just spelt wrong, the schematic language for CryEngine 5.3. Their upcoming release of CryEngine is going to have this new quote-unquote language. In fact, what it more or less is a state-building machine, which then it kind of makes a little bit more sense. Now, where it doesn't make a lot of sense is CryEngine already has a visual building system like this, and they call it Flowgraph. And then you might be wondering, well, how is this different than Flowgraph? Well, this is more low level. This is about basically creating and handling state systems, and the code that it generates is going to be C++ level of performance. So there isn't a huge overhead. So it allows you to do things like, control a game object state, things like, attack. Well, state machines are used all throughout game programming. I actually have an article on state machines if you're interested in learning more about them. But this allows you to take and basically toggle the control of state machines out into this visual node-like scripting language. And this will be coming to CryEngine 5.3, which is supposed to release, I believe, later this month. Now, another unique announcement is they acquired Anima 2D. Now, I have never used it. It's from their plugin market. So basically, they acquired one of their plugin developers from their marketplace who made a product called Anima 2D. Now, Anima 2D is like Spine, Spriter, Creature, Dragonbones, those IK-based animation systems where you set up bones for your character, you cut up your sprite into different pieces, you set up bones, and it allows you to basically animate a 2D sprite like you would a 3D sprite. Now, Anima 2D used to be for sale, and they pulled it from the market. And it is going to be released for free the end of this month. So basically, the end of December, you should be able to get Anima 2D for free if you're a Unity developer. Now, I don't know what happens to existing customers or if you just bought it. I think you're SOL. I don't know that there's any refunds happening, unfortunately. But for everyone else, it's just great news. Basically, there's a free plugin available for you now, battle tested and capable of doing 2D bone-based animation. Another announcement, this one is sort of on the verge of being game dev news, but I included it for basically personal reasons, if I'm honest, is Unreal Engine is going to be powering the next version of MechWarrior. Now, the cool news here is there's going to be another version of MechWarrior. Now, if I was to list my top 5 favorite games of all time, MechWarrior 4 Mercenaries, that series is it. And it might actually be the number 1. So it is a huge game in my world, so I am just delighted to hear that MechWarrior 5 as a standalone game, not MechWarrior Online, even though it's the same developer, but MechWarrior 5 standalone single-player game is coming. It's a thing, and it's powered by Unreal Engine. And that's all cool news. Now, why this is a little bit more relevant for game developers, though, is MechWarrior Online. The company Piranha are the makers of MechWarrior Online, the people that are going to be making MechWarrior 5. And interesting, you're going to see probably a massive amount of assets being shared. So they've modeled all of the mechs. They've got really awesome looking mechs, if we're honest about it, for MechWarrior Online. The big thing is, though, MechWarrior Online used CryEngine, and this one, MechWarrior 5, is using Unreal Engine, as we've listed here. So basically, they've made the decision, even though they have a huge source base for a mech game with all of their assets ready to go in that engine, they decided to switch technologies. And that's a pretty scathing kind of kick in the balls to CryEngine, because frankly, there isn't a lot of reason why someone would jump ship at this point, other than if they saw the alternative as quite a bit, if they were all things equal, there's no way anybody would jump a ship. So this is one of the biggest high profile CryEngine based games out there that wasn't made by Crytek. So basically, I can count on a couple hands the number of high profile CryEngine games remaining. I think there's Star Citizen, obviously, if it ever is going to ship. There's the various Crisis games, and I'm struggling at this point. I know there are others, Rise, the Son of Rome, and that's about it. So there aren't a ton of games that are being shipped out there for Crytek or CryEngine, and they just lost one of their marquee title developers. So a bit of bad news there for CryEngine, a bit of great news there for Unreal, and Unreal is obviously doing a little bit of bragging about it, as this link actually came from the Unreal Engine blog. Now, another game engine release this week was the Default Engine 1.2.94 was released. The Default Engine is a Lua-powered, mobile-focused, cross-platform game engine. I'm a big fan of it. It's 2D only, but it has support for 3D models. Now, the 3D models in the past were static models. So you could load in, say, a house model, and then it would basically be treated like a sprite. And that's very useful, sort of. Well, not really, because the big thing it was missing was animation. Here's where 3D and 2D is a big thing. 2.5D games, what they often do is create and animate their models in 3D, but render them down into 2D. Now, a big reason why you would do something like this is it allows you to be dynamic at runtime. So if I wanted to do a texture swap, so if you change the color of your shirt, I can just change it in the model and off you go. Of course, you can do a pixel swap on pixel art and such, but that kind of stuff is a whole lot less smooth, I suppose we could say. And it allows you to do things like equipable characters. So if I wanted to have, an animation of a guy attacking, and I could switch between a sword, an axe, a staff, etc. While having 3D models that are rendered to 2D sprites at runtime enables you to do this. The problem is Default did not have support for animation. Now, nicely, that is past tense because this release adds Default animation, which is really cool. On top of that, they also added automatic particle resizing from Clipbook Animations. I thought that was actually added in this. That was added in the last version, I think. I thought there was something else here. No, the biggie one, definitely then. I thought there was something about using Flipbook Animations for something new, but I might be mixing up my releases. So the big news in this particular release, by far and away, is got to be the support for animation in 3D models. So that opens up a whole world of opportunities for developers in 2D games using 3D assets. Again, preview version though, so expect some, warts, bugs, etc., and expect the functionality to improve a little bit as time goes on. If you go into the actual release notes for this release on the Default site, you will see instructions and caveats on working in 3D models. Your models are actually Collada. I think this goes into basically how the animations have to be set up, how to use them, etc. And again, it is a work in progress, so expect it to improve over time. Now, if you are interested in learning more about the Default game engine, I have linked to the tutorial series we've done here at Game from Scratch. I covered just about every aspect of using the Default engine other than basically UI. For some reason, I missed that one. And of course, 3D models, because up until now, they've been pretty useless, if I was honest about things. Now, another game engine release, and I've actually talked to the guy that maintains this game engine on Twitter a few times about doing this, is Atomic Game Engine has finally released a new build 1, and he's been updating all this cool stuff he's been doing on Twitter, but he hasn't been putting formal builds together, which makes it really hard for me to report on what's happening with Atomic Game Engine. Now, Atomic Game Engine is a cool engine. It started life as Urho 3D, URHO 3D, in case I'm pronouncing Urho wrong. But basically, this was built on that source base, and then they built this full, really well fleshed out editor, modified the underlying engine, etc., and built kind of this more user-friendly, full-featured editor on top of an open source project. And then in turn went and fully open source said project. Now, I looked at this as part of the Closer Look Game Engine series about a year back, maybe a little bit more, just before it became MIT licensed. And since then, a lot has changed. So it's cool that he's finally doing these full-blown releases. And until then, you basically were building from source to get the newest functionality. And I hope he sticks to it, because it makes it a whole lot easier for me to report on the changes that have happened. And I'm only really getting, compared to like the last time I reported, a tip of what has actually happened in this engine. But the big thing that's here is Atomic Engine now supports C# support, which is very cool. A lot of people out there working in this kind of editor. Basically, Unity made C# almost the go-to language, and you're starting to see a lot of open source languages, such as Godot, such as now Atomic, adding C# support. And there are a lot of people asking for said support. So that's cool. That adds to the existing TypeScript and JavaScript language support that's in there, as well as, of course, you can still write your code in C++ if for some reason that's something you want to do. They also added Visual Studio and Xamarin Studio integration and Visual Studio Code. That one's coming up again. It's coming soon. So basically, you can edit your C# code directly in your editor of choice. They updated TypeScript to 2.0, which is a bit of a spoiler about something that's about to happen. They added new examples and project templates. Updated the underlying Urho version, updated the Monaco Visual Studio Code editor, and that's something that actually did not exist when I reviewed it before. There's a nice, very clean built-in code editor, so if you want to do TypeScript or JavaScript development directly in the Atomic Game Engine. Enough has changed on this. Here is an update of the 2016 feature update reel, and I'm going to probably check this guy out in a little bit more detail in an upcoming video. So if you are interested in the Atomic Game Engine, do stay tuned. It's one of those probably underrepresented open source game engines out there that has a great layer of polish. It's almost a peer, or it is a peer to the Godot engine. They are very comparable. They're very open source. They're very accessible, but they take a very different approach to things. So Atomic Game Engine is one of those things that should have more exposure. And if you do want to check it out, it is available at atomicgameengine.com. And as I said earlier, full MIT support, source code. It's on GitHub. Definitely one to check out if it's off your radar. And do stay tuned to this channel. You will probably see something covering what has changed in the Atomic Game Engine since I covered it in the past. And if you are interested in seeing where it was about a year ago, do check out the Closer Look Game Engine series. Another game engine release, and one that I'm currently doing a tutorial series on, which isn't proving as popular as I hoped, so I don't think there's a lot of interest in my channel for this particular engine, which is a shame because it's a fun one, is Babylon JS 2.5 was released. Now, Babylon JS is a 3D HTML5 powered game engine. It's one of the few full 3D WebGL game engines in this space that are native to JavaScript anyways. And it's one of the, I don't know, it's a really cool engine. So I'm going to do at least a few more parts in that tutorial series, see if the interest picks up. But on my own level, I'm interested in this engine. It's a cool engine. I do recommend you check out my tutorial series if you are looking for 3D in the web browser. Actually, it's linked in this particular article. So if you want to learn more about it, do check that out. I've also did look at a closer look series at this. Now, even though it is a web-powered engine, there is a strange number of tools supported. There are asset importers. There's things for exporting levels from Unity into it. It's a cool engine. I do recommend you check it out. Now, this release, the 2.5 release, saw some pretty major updates. We've got enable highlight rendering. We got standard rendering pipeline to support screen space, lens flares, and depths of field. Now supports right-handed system instead of left-handed system, so you can toggle it out that way. Now compiled with optimized JS to get faster initial loads, etc. And we got a couple new demos, and then a number of updates and changes and fixes. It's a very cool engine. I do recommend if you're working in the web space or HTML5 space, do check it out. It's surprisingly capable with what it can do. Now, Unity 5.5 was just released, well, right here. That was on November the 30th, and now we have December 7th. We have our first patch for it. And since this is a new, 5.5, I guess it's not quite a point release, but it's a sub-point release, there's quite a bit to go wrong potentially in that. And so there's quite a few fixes in this particular patch, which, is nice to see. And you're going to see that meter off as the next patch comes in about a week, and then the next patch after, but there's quite a bit to this patch. So if you have upgraded to Unity 5.5, do consider checking out this patch, especially if one of your problems is actually there. Things like fixed auto rotation on Android 4.4 and 4.1 and older, that's a gotcha. And that's the kind of stuff that you probably need to update if you are handling those older devices, for example. And we've got a couple of improvements across the platform as well. And then finally, back to that whole TypeScript thing, TypeScript 2.1 was just released. Now, I'm not going to get into what a lot of the new things in this particular language are. It's an evolution of the language. But what we saw here is the addition of the async keyword. It's a really cool language. I'm a big fan of it. Basically, it's a superset of JavaScript. It's basically designed to make JavaScript more, big code friendly, when it gets down to things like modules and types, and thus the name TypeScript, and all the things that you want to use when you're building a very large system, like not a couple of web pages, but actual big applications in JavaScript. JavaScript starts falling apart really fast, and this is where TypeScript comes in. It adds those things on top. It basically makes JavaScript a better language, and it's a bit of a bridge until ECMA script becomes better, gets the async keyword, etc. And ultimately, TypeScript compiles down to JavaScript code. It's a lot like CoffeeScript or Dart, etc. Various other web languages that look to improve the developer experience in JavaScript. TypeScript is a great language. I do recommend you check it out if you're working in this space. And in fact, my Phaser tutorial series was done entirely using TypeScript. I am a huge fan of TypeScript. So this update is pretty nice. Now, if you want to get into the details of what this actual new update is all about, if you go to the announcement blog that oh, there it is. All right, their blog seems to be having some issues. They have full definitions of what, for example, object rest and spread means, or key of and lookup types. A lot of the new additions here are new types for very specific situations. Map types, lookup type, partial read-only record and pick types. There's improved importing, or maybe improved is the wrong word, but easier importing, which is optional and can be turned off. And then, of course, the biggie is async functions. And if you've done any parallel programming, you've probably already familiar with async functions. It's basically being taken over from the C# world. And it's a very cool feature. And it is what more or less TypeScript 2.1 is all about. So if you do want more information, do be sure to drill down into the TypeScript blog. And that's it. Actually went a lot longer than I was expecting. 19 minutes of coverage. Probably 6 of it was me talking about MechWarrior, because frankly, MechWarrior is awesome. And if you've never played it, do play it. It's a great game. It's part of why I really love games in general. So I do apologize if I was a little less concise than normal, but I hope you did find that useful. I hope you found some of the interesting, the things coming out or that were just released very useful. There's some very cool things that were released in a very short period of time. And I expect, to be honest, as we move closer and closer to Christmas, there's going to be less and less frequency between these releases because I expect there not to be this many stories next week. All right, if you enjoyed that, please do click like. And as always, we do these, weekly, bi-weekly, whatever, and all kinds of news, tutorials, game engine reviews, you name it on this channel. If you want, that sounds interesting to you, do click subscribe, and hopefully we keep you interested. All righty, see you all later, guys.